Hello, everyone. We are wrapping up the President's chapter today. Some of you may have, I don't know, in the last couple of days may have wondered about this right here. This little scar right here. Maybe you don't care. But you do dumb things, especially as you get older. I was putting insulation up in a bonus room in my garage, and I had a stapler on the top of a high step ladder. And I just moved the step ladder real fast, and this top step was a couple feet probably above my head. And the staple gun, not a stapler, but a staple gun, fell down to the second step, bounced off, and then the pointed part hit me right in the head and about knocked me out. It was crazy. I mean, I got black real quick, and I'm sure I had a concussion. It was bad, but I thought, but anyway, so I've been dealing with that a little bit. No biggie, but anyway, so we are going to finish the presidency today. A lot of just terms here, but I will minimize this and then go here. So the presidency, the president and the economy, I'm going to skip that law on there. And these, I'm going to breeze through these three things because we do these in the economics chapter in a lot more detail. So the president and how the president can have some type of impact on the economy. One is through fiscal policy, but fiscal policy is the one here that would be the one most likely that politicians could use. This is really involves Congress and the president. Fiscal policy is the government's control of taxing and spending. So you just think of taxing and government spending. So if the president himself can't generally do that, but maybe the president introduces, he says the economy's bad. He goes, I'd like a tax cut for people, and then Congress passes it through, and so that can impact the economy. And then government spending would be, let's spend more to kickstart the economy, even if it puts us into a debt or something like that. So fiscal policy is taxing and spending. Monetary policy is controlled by the Federal Reserve. The Fed, they call it, and again, we'll do this in more detail in another chapter, but the Fed controls interest rates. So there are other things too that the Fed does, but interest rates are the big one. So this is monetary policy is control of the money supply. And so we think of that mostly in terms of interest rates. If you raise interest rates, fewer people are going to take loans out, more people put their money into like a savings account. And so the money supply shrinks because money is sitting in banks or somewhere. People aren't taking loans out. If you lower interest rates a lot, then people are more likely to take a loan out and buy a new house or buy a new car or do an addition on their house or something like that. And not as likely to just keep it in a low interest savings account or something. So that means more money is running around the economy, more money's out there. So, but the president doesn't directly control that. He does appoint the leaders of the Fed, and the Senate approves, but then they're just sort of on their own. So they may listen to the president, they may not, but they're independent. Then incomes policy, you very rarely see this. This would be, in World War II this happened, but this would be if the president jumps in a national emergency and freezes prices and wages, and says, look, we can't have prices going sky high because let's say that in World War II they might have been low on sugar or rubber or tin or almost anything. And so since they were lower on it, then thinking is people could charge more, and that would cause crazy inflation, but it would also just raise the price on goods. And in order for people to keep up with that, you'd have to raise wages in order to be able to pay for stuff, or else, lots of issues there. So if there's some national emergency, the president could just freeze prices and wages. Now, just some terms, nothing real interesting here, maybe. The legislative liaison staff, we go to that one. That's just they call it a go-between. That is basically a staff that is. I'm going to minimize this. Let me go. Sorry to get this to talk out loud here, but okay. So the legislative liaison staff is basically just a go-between for the president and Congress. So it is a staff of people that keeps the president informed on what Congress wants and Congress informed on what the president wants. You don't hear much about this, so I'm not too worried about that staff. Bully pulpit. The president has this sometimes, sometimes doesn't. This is when the president's, gets basically on a pulpit is where, especially in the old days, you think of like a priest gives a sermon, and so in front of the congregation or whatever. So the priest would go up there and he would say, "Here's the lesson. Here's the passage from whatever religious document, and here's the lesson learned." And so you're up high and you're speaking towards to people. So the president can have the bully pulpit. If the president is really popular and he gets up there and he says, "I'm the president, I want you to do this, Congress," then he may be able to sort of push Congress around because they'd be afraid not to go along with him because it might hurt their re-election chances. If the president's really unpopular, or maybe in his last few months in office or something, then he's not going to have as much of a bully pulpit. So this is the idea of saying something and kind of pushing people around. When you say it, kind of forcing them to do it. I'll skip impoundment. That's not a big issue anymore. Then you got the types of veto. So we mentioned veto. Veto is when the president he says no to a bill, and it's very difficult to override. You're going to need 2/3 of each House of Congress separate. A pocket veto very rarely happens. A pocket veto is when okay, let me backtrack. When Congress passes a bill, both houses of Congress, they give it to the president. The president gets 10 days to decide what to do with the bill. If he signs it, it becomes law. If after 10 days in the middle of a session of Congress he does nothing, it just becomes law. So he has to decide what to do within those first 10 days. If he vetoes it, they can override him. But he has 10 days. So a pocket veto would be if Congress is going to adjourn for a session. So maybe it's that they're going to go away for the summer, and they give the president a bill 5 days before they're going to go away, and he does nothing. Well, the bill dies. They're going to have to reintroduce it and go through the whole process again in the next session. So this is so basically it's within the last 10 days of a session of Congress, the president gets a bill and does nothing with it. It just dies, all right, since he has 10 days to decide. So this doesn't happen a lot because of Congress nowadays. It doesn't, because Congress knows pretty much if the president supports it or not. So they're not going to give him a bill that he's not going to do that to in the last 10 days. So they'd be more likely to try to get it through earlier or wait to force him to make a decision. Line item veto, the president does not have this power. It is to me, it would be a nice power for the president to have. President Clinton, a Democrat, did have this power very briefly in the 1990s. The Republican-controlled Congress in the 90s passed a Line Item Veto Act, giving the president the ability to declare parts of a spending bill, or not declare it, but to cancel out, to veto parts of a spending bill. To veto those parts and then approve the rest, so approve the whole thing but cancel out parts of it. The Supreme Court declared the Line Item Veto Act unconstitutional. They said Congress can't pass a bill changing the process that a bill becomes a law. The only way you could give the president line item veto power is to amend the Constitution. And so it was basically the ability for the president to cancel out a certain part of it. Now, I'm going to show you with my bad drawing here, probably. I'm going to show you basically what this would be. If you had a spending bill, so blah blah blah. Okay, so here's the spending bill, and it's 50 pages long. It gets to the president. It's all these items, all this pork barrel spending. Then the president could, based on this, the president could go through and go, "No, I like that, I like that, I like that. Oh, I don't like this part, whatever. $5 million for a bridge somewhere. I like this, I like this, I like this. I don't like that part. All right, I like everything else." And he could sign it. All right, there. All right. Let me backtrack. He could take these two parts and he could go, "I don't want those two," and then sign it. All right. So now Congress, if they really like those two little spending provisions, they would have to vote 2/3 of each house to override this one and this one. But a lot of times those spending things are really wasteful spending, since all states get spending sent their way, and you have all that pork barrel spending. But this right here, again, most people like Democrats and Republicans because it gets rid of wasteful spending. This was declared unconstitutional. So just make sure you're aware the president does not have line item veto power to cancel out. The president basically he can't do this. He can't address those two parts only. He has to sign the whole bill or just veto the whole bill. So that's what that is. It is kind of an interesting thing. Again, I wish they had it, but it would take a constitutional amendment to get that passed. Now, the last real slide with notes here, if I just skip to the two underlined parts, War Powers Act of 1973, this is just memorization here. Basically, Richard Nixon was unpopular at the time as the Watergate stuff came out. And so Congress passed this, and they said that the president, if he's going to bomb somewhere, invade, send troops, anything, that he has to tell Congress within 48 hours why he did it. Now, what had happened by 1973 is presidents, and still to this day, they stopped declaring war, asking for declarations of war because Congress declares war. So, and that's frustrated Congress because the Constitution says the president commands troops and Congress declares war. Well, our last declared war in America was World War II. So Vietnam, Korea, Iraq, Afghanistan, none of them would be declared wars. And Congress is frustrated. They're like, you're ignoring us. So they passed this law, and it says within 48 hours after you bomb or attack or whatever, you have to tell us why you did it. And if we don't like why you did it, then those troops have to come back within 60 days. All right, so you could basically still have your own little war for 60 days. If the troops were maybe on a battlefield lined up against some big enemy or something, and there was a risk that if you pulled away half of them, someone would be attacked and get killed. If it was for troop safety, they could grant a 30-day extension. So basically, you must tell Congress why you sent troops, and then the troops have to return. Now, this is I think about every president ever has felt that this is an unconstitutional law, but it's never been challenged. Because every single time, once the president has asked or told them why he's doing it, the Congress has agreed. So it's never kicked in the second part. But anyway, so you're just saying 48 hours, tell Congress, 60 days, troops must return, or an additional 30 days. Impeachment of the president, I mentioned this in the first chapter. House of Representatives impeaches, which is just to accuse the president of something with a majority vote, and that is what happened with, most recently, Donald Trump. The Senate then holds the trial. The only thing they can do is remove the president, not send him to jail or something, and they need a 2/3 vote, which is very, very difficult to get. So we have never had a president removed. Andrew Johnson almost was, but Bill Clinton and Trump were not almost removed. So that's the impeachment process. And then I'm going to just show you, to finish this section, North Carolina's historical vote, just for the last minute. If you look at this, this is on 270towin.com, talks about North Carolina's history in voting for presidents. If you look at this since 1972, so the North Carolina's voted Republican, then Democrat, and Jimmy Carter when Democrats ran a Southerner, and then all Republicans, and they did have that one vote for Obama, which was a big win for Democrats. Typically, North Carolina is voting Republican all the way across. And you see the trend here for North Carolina, going back to the beginning, is red is Republican. And we don't know what's going to happen in 2020. But so you have that Obama election there in 2008. You go back in 76, you have the Carter election. Other than that, it's all Republicans here. Well, understand that 1964 and before, all these blues you see, the South was solidly Democratic. The South was always Democratic throughout until the Civil Rights period, which we'll talk about later. So once Democrats started supporting civil rights after the 64 election, then, well, actually right before the 64 election, but after the Voting Rights Act of 1965, that's going to make the South go to the Republican Party. The white South will switch to the Republican Party. Anyway, we will stop there. I appreciate it, and we'll see everyone tomorrow.